Daydreaming again, Lena? Elias removes his sodden baseball cap, revealing wavy brown hair across his forehead. He instinctively reaches out to ruffle my hair, a gesture so natural it might have been practiced 1,000 times. I duck my head quickly, pretending to study the foam at the bottom of my cup, while the tips of my ears burn uncontrollably. This intimacy has defined our 20 years together, yet it's also the cage that traps me. We grew up in the alley behind the Fairmont Hotel. His father was a bartender there, and my mother worked in the laundry room. Two kids from single-parent homes, we naturally became each other's anchor. On Halloween when I was 7, I dressed myself as a clumsy little pumpkin, only to burst into tears when a stray dog chased me while I was trick-or-treating. It was Elias, in a Superman cape and wielding a plastic sword, who charged forward. His legs were shaking, but he yelled, "Don't be scared, I'll protect you." Adolescence hit like a storm when we were 12. I began secretly sketching his profile in my diary, and when he taught me to play baseball, I'd intentionally drop the ball just to catch a glimpse of his waistline as he bent to retrieve it. But Elias always stayed in the best buddy role. He'd split his sandwich with me at lunch, stand up for me when girls teased me about my freckles, yet frown and say, "You look more comfortable in sweatpants," when I mustered the courage to mention wearing a dress to the dance. Graduation day brought a rare sunny spell to Seattle. We lay on the grass beneath the Space Needle, gazing at a sky so blue it seemed unreal. "I applied to the computer science program at UW, Elias said, a blade of grass between his teeth, his voice carried soft by the wind. "What about you?" "The illustration program at the art school should be a sure thing, right?" I clutched my acceptance letter, my heart squeezing tight. We'd both stayed in the same city, but were about to head in entirely different directions. "Lena? What's got you so lost in thought?" Elias waves a hand in front of my face. I jolt back to reality to find he's already ordered my favorite cinnamon roll, carefully wiping the edge of the plate with a napkin. "Nothing," I manage a smile. "Just nervous about my illustration exhibition next weekend." It wasn't a lie. My graduation series, titled 20 Years, featured him in every piece, but I dared not sign my name to it. Those 4 college years pulled us close and pushed us apart in turns. He became a standout in the computer science department, never lacking girls with love letters in hand. Every time I saw him walking beside another girl on campus, I'd duck into the nearest building and wait until my racing heart calmed. Just last week, I spotted him in the engineering building hallway helping a blonde freshman fix her laptop. When she looked up and smiled at him, sunlight caught her hair, a sight so sharp it made me run for the stairs, leaving my art supplies scattered on the floor without a second thought. Elias later tracked me down to the studio, my supplies in hand, his fingertips stained with cobalt blue from my paintbox. "Why did you run?" He frowned deeply. "I called your name 3 times. I stared at the paint on his knuckles, a sour taste rising in my throat. "Didn't want to interrupt you and your friend's project discussion." He blinked, then chuckled as he set the supplies down. Pulling a tissue from his pocket, he wiped his hands. "She's a freshman in the department, her laptop had a virus. I was just helping out." His explanation sounded flawless, but I couldn't miss the half-hidden pink envelope peeking from his pocket, the love letter the girl had given him. He hadn't thrown it away, yet he hadn't opened it either. That afternoon, Elias stayed to help me organize my sketches, sorting the loose papers by date. His fingers paused for 2 seconds when they brushed a sketch of his profile, but he said nothing. I pretended to focus on mixing paint, my peripheral vision fixed entirely on him. My heart raced so fast it felt like it's going to burst out of my chest, until he said, "This looks just like me," dashing the flicker of hope I'd felt. Our awkward dance of hesitation played out in these tiny moments. He remembered my nut allergy, specifically asking the waiter to remove walnuts from my salad at club dinners, yet waved off my thanks with force of habit. I'd leave a warm croissant outside his lab when he pulled all-nighters coding, tucking a note with a cartoon Superman drawn on it underneath, too afraid to sign my name. Once, when he had a cold and fever, I stood outside the boys' dorm clutching a thermos. When he appeared, he was wearing my old sweatshirt, the one I'd left at his place in high school, and he'd kept it all these years. "It's cozy," he smiled, sniffling as he took the thermos. Our fingers brushed accidentally, and both of us pulled back as if burned, the air thick with his ragged breathing. The most torturous moment came at the campus ball. I'd splurged on a lavender dress, my hands twisting the hem nervously as I stood outside the auditorium. When Elias arrived, his eyes lit up. He reached out as if to tuck my wind-tousled hair behind my ear, but froze mid-movement, instead brushing a leaf off my shoulder. "You look beautiful tonight," his voice dropped lower than usual. "Prettier than in sweatpants." I opened my mouth to speak, but a girl carrying champagne approached, asking him to dance. He glanced at me, hesitated, and said, "Wait for me," before being pulled onto the dance floor. I stood in the corner for an hour, watching him dance with different girls. Every time he spun around, our eyes would meet, but he never came over. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and walked back to my dorm in the light rain. Just as I reached the school gate, I heard footsteps behind me. Elias caught up, holding a black umbrella, his jacket still dotted with sequins from the ball. "Why didn't you wait?" "You were busy," I mumbled, kicking at puddles on the sidewalk. "I didn't want to bother you." He suddenly thrust the umbrella into my hands and ran into the rain. "I only danced with them to fulfill the student council's requirements." "Lena, can you stop pushing me away all the time?" I froze, watching his soaking figure fade into the rain, the umbrella handle still warm from his touch. That night, he texted, "Sorry for snapping at you," but never explained what he'd meant by, "Stop pushing me away." I stared at the screen for half an hour, typing and deleting messages, before finally replying, "Get some rest." The rain started again outside, just like the night I'd hidden behind him, crying, at 12. I still couldn't read his mind, just as he'd never noticed the diary in my drawer, filled with his name. He always found me when I disappeared, sighing in exasperation, hiding from me again? I was just discussing projects with them. But he never explained why he went out of his way to care for me, just as I could never bring myself to ask why he kept my sketches carefully in a folder, or why he'd given me the limited edition paintbrush I'd rambled about for 6 months on my birthday. Once, I came down with a high fever and lay in bed, delirious. Through the fog, I felt someone changing the cool towel on my forehead. Opening my eyes, I saw Elias sitting beside my bed, dark circles under his eyes. On the table was a bowl of chicken soup. He'd never cooked a day in his life. Later, I learned he'd called my mom 3 times for instructions, nearly burning down his kitchen in the process. The soup was too salty, but I drank every drop. He sat beside me peeling an apple, the skin curling into a perfect spiral, much like his care for me, so meticulous it made my heart flutter. "Want to see the code I've been working on?" He tried to break the silence, pushing his laptop toward me. On the screen was a simple game, a Superman wielding a sword, chasing a pumpkin-shaped monster. "It's a bit childish," he scratched his head. "I wanted to make it an interactive display for your exhibition." I stared at the bouncing Superman, tears suddenly spilling down my cheeks. He panicked, reaching out to wipe my tears, but froze just before touching my cheek, his ears turning bright red. In that moment, I almost blurted out the words I'd hidden for 8 years, until he said, "You're my most important little sister," slamming the door on my courage. I turned to look out the window, raindrops streaking the glass, blurring the distant Space Needle. He must have thought I'd fallen asleep, because I heard him sigh softly. His fingers brushed my hair, a touch as light as a feather. I kept my eyes closed, feigning sleep, and could clearly hear his heartbeat, just as erratic as my own. The rain intensified, tapping sharply against the glass. Elias checked his watch, grabbing his jacket from the chair. I have a programming competition this afternoon, so I need to head to the lab early. Oh, and I'll definitely be at your exhibition next weekend. He paused, pulling a small box from his pocket. Saw this at Pike Place Market yesterday. Thought it suited you. My breath caught as I opened the box. Inside was a small silver pumpkin pendant, exactly like the costume I'd worn for Halloween when I was 7. Engraved on the back, in tiny letters, "My Superman Girl." Tears welled up unbidden. I looked up to say something, but only caught his hurrying back, blurred by the rain, just like the feelings I couldn't quite grasp. Exhibition day brought sunshine, a miracle in Seattle. I stood at the gallery entrance, my palms sweating. The 20 Years series hung in the most prominent spot, him in his Superman cape at 7, in his baseball cap at 17, every piece a secret I'd carried. The gallery was crowded, but my eyes stayed fixed on the door. It wasn't until sunset that Elias arrived, his suit still bearing the ribbon from his programming competition trophy. He walked straight to my series, silent as he looked at each piece. My hands grew clammy, and I made to slip away, until he grabbed my wrist. This is. His voice trembled as he pointed to one painting, the night I'd had a fever at 18, him carrying me to the hospital, streetlights stretching our shadows long. This is us, isn't it? He turned to me, his brown eyes swirling with emotions I'd never seen before. Why yes, it's us. I stared at the floor, too afraid to meet his gaze. I know it's weird. If it makes you uncomfortable. My words died in my throat as he pulled me into a tight hug. His heart thundered against my chest, faster even than when he'd won programming competitions. Silly girl, his chin rested on top of my head, his voice hoarse. Did you really think I'd share my sandwich with just anyone? That I'd track you down every time you hid? That I'd remember the pumpkin costume you wore when you were 7? I looked up suddenly, falling into his warm, tender eyes. Why you? I stammered, lost for words. I've liked you since you gave me your only piece of candy when we were 10. Elias brushed away my tears, his fingertips still familiar. I thought you only saw me as an older brother. I was too scared to say anything, I didn't want to lose you as a friend. In that moment, all the hesitation and awkwardness melted away. I stood on tiptoe and kissed him. His lips tasted like sunlight and coffee, warmer than I'd ever imagined. Soft applause broke out around us, and I realized the gallery visitors were watching, smiling kindly. Elias held me tighter, whispering in my ear, Lena, from now on, I want to be the only subject of your paintings. Our love was like Seattle's spring, warm and gentle. He'd bring me hot milk when I stayed up late sketching, sitting quietly beside me as he coded. I'd turn his frustration into silly cartoons when he lost a programming competition, cheering him up. We'd buy fresh blueberries at Pike Place Market, watch the night view from the Space Needle, and revisit the alley behind the Fairmont Hotel, reminiscing about our childhood. We had a fight once, when he forgot our anniversary to meet a project deadline. I locked myself in my studio, refusing to see him, until there was a knock at my door late at night. Opening it, I found Elias holding a huge jack-o'-lantern, our names carved into its side. I know I messed up, he scratched his head, looking like a guilty kid. I followed an online tutorial for 3 hours to carve this. It's a bit lopsided, though. I burst out laughing, all anger vanishing. He pulled me into his arms, whispering in my ear, I used to be afraid I couldn't give you the best. That's why I hesitated to confess. But now I know, the best is just us, together. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the devotion in his eyes, and our future. A year after graduation, we had a small wedding at an outdoor restaurant in Pike Place Market. He wore a sharp suit, and I wore a wedding dress embroidered with tiny pumpkins. His father raised a cocktail, grinning, I always knew you two kids would end up together. My mom held my hand, wiping away tears, I've been waiting for this day. After the ceremony, Elias held my hand as we walked along Puget Sound. The sunset stretched our shadows long, just like that rainy night years ago. Remember when we were 10? He stopped, turning to face me. You said you'd marry Superman when you grew up. Well, your Superman's kept his promise. I smiled and nodded, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. Seattle's wind carried the salt of the ocean, mixing with the familiar pine scent of him, the sweetest smell of happiness in my life. Some loves are like Seattle's rain, seemingly endless, yet seeping into every corner of your life. Those years of hesitation and awkwardness, those secrets hidden in our hearts, they all bloomed into the sweetest flowers at just the right moment. And I'm the luckiest person alive, to have waited for the one who'd loved me quietly for 20 years, right until the perfect time.